Now what we're going to do is we're going to apply some shocks to our full perfect competition and market model. And you can see what I've done. Remember that the P star that the firm faces in a perfectly competitive world, because they're producing homogeneous goods. In other words, are perfect substitutes across firms. And they're all small relative to the industry size. This P star means that that firms in this industry are taking this price as given, taking the market price as given. In other words, they have no influence over the market price because they're all small relative to the industry size, and they're producing perfect substitutes across firms. Now, just as a little side note, that's a lot of times why people call perfectly competitive firms price takers. Okay, they're called price takers because they take the market price as given. Any shock that hits the market reverberates through the firm, and the firm adjusts to what the market tells it to do, so to speak. And we'll see that here in a second. So let's apply a shock to this firm. Let's assume that we're looking at a normal good here, and say it's we're looking at the market for lobster. Okay, lobster is a homogeneous product. You can't tell one lobsterman's catch as being any different from another lobsterman's catch. And in other words, if I took a lobster off one lobster boat and a lobster off another lobster boat and held them up in front of you, would you be able to tell that one came off one boat and one off another boat? No, because they look like lobster. They look the same. So lobster is a homogeneous good, works in a perfectly competitive industry, or exists in a perfectly competitive industry. But this is the market for lobster. Okay, this is the overall market. Now, realize here that the sum of each lobsterman's catch equals how much lobster is in the market. Okay, so you take all the lobsterman's catch, you take Q star PCs across every firm, you add them all up, that equals the amount of lobster in the marketplace. Okay, now lobster, I think people would say is a normal good for sure. What happens if the government raises tax rates? Okay, income tax rates. Well, people have less take-home pay, and if lobster is a normal good, then we know that the demand for lobster should fall. Okay, so demand for lobster shifts to the left. Okay, now what does this do? Well, this pushes the price of lobster down, because if the industry kept the price of lobster at the same price, okay, as we know, there would be a surplus of lobster. So to get rid of that surplus, the industry has to lower the price level. Now, when they do this, of course, the new, since price and marginal cost are the same, price and marginal revenue are the same. As price falls, marginal revenue falls, meaning that the intersection of marginal revenue and marginal cost, the profit maximizing condition for every firm, goes to the southwest. Every firm then will catch less lobster, okay, because they're not getting paid as much for it, so they're not going to have an incentive to catch as much lobster. What does this also mean? It means that every lobsterman is now making a loss. They're making an economic loss. Why? Because at the new Q star, the price level is less than average total cost. Now, what will occur? Well, as we've discussed in previous videos, some firms will be able to handle the loss for a period of time. Some firms won't. They simply don't have as much cash on hand. They don't simply have as much cash stuffed in their mattress, so to speak. So those firms that can't sustain this loss for a long period of time will start to leave the industry. As they start to drop out of the industry, as we discussed in the last video, then you're summing over fewer marginal cost curves. What does this mean? It means that you're going to start shifting industry supply to the left. The question is, how far does it shift to the left? Well, industry supply is going to shift to the left until the incentive to leave the industry no longer exists. Let me say that again. When firms are making a loss in a perfectly competitive market, industry supply will shift to the left until the incentive to leave no longer exists. What is the incentive to leave? It's the loss that is currently being made. So this loss is eliminated when prices rise back up. Okay, when industry supply shifts to the left, increasing the price level back up to where it was. Okay, then the lobstermen that are left in the industry then readjust their catch back upwards as marginal cost and marginal revenue move back up toward the northeast. Okay, and negative profits are eliminated. Okay, then people no longer have an incentive to leave the industry because, again, normal profits is what's normal. It's what's expected. Zero economic profit. Okay, so when people are back at zero economic profit, they're perfectly happy with that. Um, what does this mean? Well, it means that the pre-shock price level will be reset at the original price level. Okay, P prime, again, ceteris paribus, holding all costs and everything constant. The pre-shock price level will be reestablished at, P star, okay? But the amount of lobster on the market will be less. And why will the amount of lobster on the market be less? Because there's fewer people catching lobster in the market, okay? All the existing firms that stayed in the market, that rode out this bad time, they're catching the amount of lobster they did before the shock hit the market. They're back catching their original amount, but there's fewer firms left in the market. Okay, meaning that we're summing over fewer Q-star PCs, which indicates that the amount of lobster on the market will fall. Okay, so this is what a typical demand shock looks like. Okay, pre-shock price levels will be reestablished. Okay, so the long run prevailing price level will be what existed before the shock. There will be fewer firms in the marketplace and a lower amount of product on the market. Let's stick with this market for lobster. Okay, so we've got individual demand, okay, average variable cost. We have the profit maximizing output level. Once again, we set the firm at its long run profit level, which is zero economic profit. We're going to hook it up to the market vis-a-vis the market price level. Okay, and there is the market equilibrium quantity. Now let's assume, so this is once again is the market for lobster, and this is a typical lobster fisherman. Let's assume that the price of cod increases. Now, cod is not a shellfish, but it is a regular seafood, regular fish. And you can imagine somebody who just likes seafood in general standing at a seafood counter at a grocery store, and they see the price of cod this week is really high, and they're like, wow, now I can switch over and maybe buy some lobster. Uh, you know, in other words, we could think of lobster and codfish as being substitutes. The price of cod rises, then the demand for lobster will rise if indeed they are substitutes. So the demand curve for lobster will shift to the right. What does this do? This pushes the price of lobster upward. Okay. Now, as you can see, the intersection of marginal cost and marginal revenue has went to the northeast, meaning that every lobster fisherman is now trying to pack overstuff their boat, so to speak. They're trying to pack as much lobster on their boat as they can. Why? The law of supply. Law of supply says that as prices rise, firms have an incentive to make more product. If the lobsterman can get an abnormally high price for his catch, well, he's going to try and pack his boat as full as he can. What happens? Well, now every lobster fisherman is making an economic profit. Okay. Um, Investors see this, and investors in this instance may be a halibut fishermen. Okay, so you have a whole halibut industry over here on the side. They're looking at these lobstermen, and these lobstermen are making money hand over fist, making a lot of money. It's positive economic profits. Well, halibut guys then go, well, look, I'm going to stop fishing for halibut, and I'm going to move into the lobster industry and start fishing lobster. And that's what they do. Now, as they move into the lobster industry, we're going to be summing over more marginal cost curves in the industry. Remember the last video we looked at. As that occurs, industry supply will start to shift to the right. Okay. Question is, how far will it shift to the right? Well, like the loss situation, but only reverse of it, the industry supply curve, in other words, firms will continue to enter until the incentive to enter no longer exists. And what is that incentive to enter? Positive economic profits. Once those positive economic profits are gone, there is no more incentive to enter this industry, meaning that the supply curve will stop at that point. Where are positive economic profits gone? When price drops back down to its original level. Again, ceteris paribus, holding costs and everything else constant. Okay. What does this mean? Well, pre-shock price level will be reestablished, but there will be more more lobster on the market, selling at the original pre-shock price level. Okay. Why? Because there's more fishermen fishing for lobster. Okay. So what is the outcome of this? And that, if you notice, this was just the reverse situation of the last situation we did. The shock was different, but the dynamics in the models were exactly opposite. So what do we end up with? We ended up with long run pre-shock price being reestablished, more lobster on the market, and more lobster fishermen fishing for lobster. The existing firms did realize positive economic profit in the short run, but as the long run started to take over and firms moved in, that profit then went away. So they benefited, but they're back to making normal profit, and they're perfectly happy making normal profit.